Your mind doesn't live in your brain. I know that sounds crazy. You probably think right now that your thoughts, your consciousness, your sense of self, all of that is happening inside your skull between your ears, in that 3-pound lump of neural tissue we call the brain. But I am going to tell you something that decades of studying neuroscience, quantum mechanics, and the nature of consciousness has taught me. Your mind doesn't exist in any single location. It is not contained in your brain. It is not even contained in your body. And once you understand why, everything changes. Let me take you on a journey through modern science, and I'll show you why the location of your mind is nothing like what you think it is. When I was younger, before I really started thinking deeply about consciousness, I assumed the mind was obviously in the brain. Where else could it be? When you think, it is your brain doing the thinking. When you feel, it is neurons firing. When you remember, it is synapses activating. The brain is the organ of the mind. This seems so obvious that questioning it feels absurd. But here is the thing. The more we've learned about the brain, about consciousness, about the nature of mental processes, the more this simple picture has fallen apart. The mind is not located in the brain the way your stomach is located in your abdomen. It is something stranger, something more distributed, something that doesn't fit into our normal categories of location and containment. Let me start with the most basic problem. What do we even mean by the mind? Are we talking about consciousness, about thought, about the sense of self, about subjective experience? These are all related, but not identical. And none of them have a simple physical location. Take consciousness, your awareness, your experience of being you right now. Where is it? You might say it is in your brain, but where in your brain there is no consciousness center, no single region that when active creates consciousness and when inactive eliminates it. Consciousness seems to involve the whole brain, or at least large distributed networks across the brain. It is not localized to a point or even to a region. It is a pattern of activity across many areas. And here is something that really troubles the simple picture. Your brain is constantly changing which regions are active. The pattern of neural activity shifts every millisecond. Neurons fire, then go quiet, networks activate, then deactivate. If consciousness is this pattern, then the location of consciousness is constantly moving. It is nowhere fixed. It is a dynamic process, spread across changing neural terrain. Where is your mind? It is wherever the relevant pattern of activity is happening, and that is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. But let's go deeper. The brain is not isolated. It is connected to the entire body through the nervous system, and there is increasing evidence that the body is not just a vessel for the brain. It is part of the cognitive system. Consider your gut. You have something like 100 million neurons in your enteric nervous system. The nervous system of your digestive tract, that is more neurons than in the spinal cord. These neurons communicate with the brain constantly through the vagus nerve. They influence your mood, your decisions, your sense of well-being. When you have a gut feeling, that is not a metaphor, that is literal. Your gut is sending signals that influence your mental state. Is your gut part of your mind? It is certainly part of the system that generates mental states. Or think about your heart. Your heart has its own nervous system, tens of thousands of neurons that process information independently. The heart sends more signals to the brain than the brain sends to the heart. These signals affect emotional processing, decision-making, perception. The pattern of your heartbeat influences how you feel, what you notice, how you think. Is your heart part of your mind? The boundary between mind and body is not as clear as we thought. Your mind is embodied. It extends through your nervous system, through your organs, through the biochemical environment of your entire body. Where does your mind exist? Not just in your brain, in your whole body. And it gets stranger. Let me tell you about something called the extended mind hypothesis, proposed by philosophers Andy Clark and David Chalmers back in 1998. The idea is simple but radical. The mind is not bounded by the skull or even by the skin. Cognitive processes extend into the environment. Consider someone with Alzheimer's disease who uses a notebook to remember things. The notebook contains information they can't hold in their biological memory. When they need to recall something, they consult the notebook. Is the notebook part of their mind? Clark and Chalmers argue, yes. The notebook is playing the same functional role that biological memory plays for someone without Alzheimer's. It is storing information and making it available for cognitive processing. The fact that it is external, made of paper instead of neurons, doesn't matter. What matters is its functional role in the cognitive system. No, you might object the notebook is external. It is not really part of the mind, but why not? What makes the boundary of the mind the boundary of the skull? We don't think the mind stops at the sensory organs. Your retina is part of your visual system, but it is not in your brain. It is in your eye. We accept that sensory organs are part of the cognitive system even though they're outside the brain. Why can't tools and external storage be part of the cognitive system too? Think about your smartphone. You use it to remember phone numbers, appointments, directions, facts. You offload cognitive tasks to it constantly. When you need to know something, you don't retrieve it from biological memory. You check your phone. Your phone is functioning as external memory, as an extension of your cognitive system. Is your phone part of your mind in a meaningful sense? Yes. Your cognitive processes don't stop at your skin. They extend into the devices you use, the notes you take, the environment you structure. Your mind is distributed across brain, body, and world. Where does your mind exist? Everywhere you've extended your cognitive processes, in your brain, in your body, in your notebook, in your phone, in the structured environment you've created. Let me tell you about another way the mind extends beyond the brain. Social cognition, your mind is shaped by and embedded in social networks. The way you think, the concepts you use, the language you speak, all of this comes from other people. You didn't invent language, you learned it from your social environment, and language structures thought the categories you use to divide up reality, the concepts you use to reason. These are cultural, social, inherited from generations of other minds. Your individual mind is part of a larger collective mind. You think with tools that other people created, you use concepts that other people developed. Your thoughts are not purely your own. They're socially constructed, embedded in a web of meanings created by countless other minds across history and in real time. Your cognitive processes are constantly coupled with other people. When you have a conversation, you are not just exchanging information. You are creating a shared cognitive system. Two minds thinking together, finishing each other's sentences, building ideas collaboratively. The thought process is not happening in one brain or the other. It is happening in the interaction, in the space between you. Where is that thought? It is not in your brain. It is not in the other person's brain. It is in the coupled system, the temporary collective mind you've created together. Your mind extends into other minds through communication, through shared culture, through collective cognition. Where does your mind exist? Partly in other people. Now let me tell you about something from physics that makes this even stranger. Quantum mechanics, I know. Everyone brings up quantum mechanics when they want to sound mysterious. But hear me out. There is something genuinely weird here that relates to consciousness. In quantum mechanics, systems exist in superposition, multiple states at once, until they're observed. The act of observation collapses the superposition into a definite state. This is the measurement problem. What counts as an observation? Does it require consciousness? Some physicists, like Eugene Wigner and John von Neumann, argued that consciousness plays a fundamental role in collapsing the wave function. If that is true, then consciousness is not just a byproduct of physical processes. It is a fundamental feature of reality that affects physical processes. Now, most physicists today don't accept this interpretation. Decoherence explains wave function collapse without invoking consciousness. But the question remains open, and it points to something deep. The relationship between mind and matter is not as straightforward as we thought. If consciousness can affect physical systems, even in some small way, then the mind is not just a passive observer of physical reality, it is an active participant. And that changes where we think the mind is. It is not just inside your head observing the world. It is entangled with the world, affecting it part of the same quantum system. Let me tell you about another perspective on this. The hard problem of consciousness, philosopher David Chalmers identified this. The hard problem is explaining why physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experience. Why is there something it is like to be you? Why does consciousness exist at all? We can explain the functional aspects of mind, how the brain processes information, makes decisions, controls behavior. These are the easy problems. But explaining why any of this feels like something, why there is subjective experience, that is the hard problem. And nobody has solved it. No theory of neuroscience explains why neurons firing should create the feeling of seeing red, or tasting chocolate, or feeling sad. Some philosophers, like Chalmers himself, argue that consciousness might be fundamental, not reducible to physical processes, a basic feature of reality like mass or charge. If consciousness is fundamental, then it is not located in the brain as a product of neural activity. It is everywhere, or at least potentially everywhere. And the brain is not creating consciousness. It is organizing it, focusing it, structuring it. But consciousness itself is not made by the brain. It is accessed by the brain, channeled by the brain, shaped by the brain, but not created by it. Where does your mind exist if consciousness is fundamental everywhere? Nowhere. It is not a question of location. It is a question of organization. No, let me tell you about split brain patients. This is one of the strangest findings in neuroscience. The brain has two hemispheres connected by a bundle of nerve fibers called the corpus callosum. In some severe epilepsy cases, surgeons cut the corpus callosum to prevent seizures from spreading. This creates a split brain patient, someone whose two hemispheres can't communicate. And when you test these patients carefully, something bizarre happens. The two hemispheres seem to have separate streams of consciousness. The left hemisphere controls the right side of the body and usually handles language. The right hemisphere controls the left side and handles spatial tasks. If you show a split, brain patient an image only to the left visual field, processed by the right hemisphere, they can't verbally report what they saw because the right hemisphere can't talk, but they can point to it with their left hand. The right hemisphere saw it, knows it, but can't tell the left hemisphere. There, two minds in one skull, two separate streams of consciousness. Some researchers think yes, the split brain patient has two selves, two centers of awareness. Where is the mind of a split brain patient? In the left hemisphere? In the right hemisphere, in both. This challenges the idea that there is one unified mind in one location. Consciousness can be split, divided, distributed across separate systems that don't communicate. Your mind might not be one thing in one place. It might be multiple processes that normally work together, but can be separated. Let me tell you about another aspect of this, neuroplasticity. The brain constantly rewires itself. Neurons that fire together wire together. The physical structure of your brain changes based on your experiences. If you learn a new skill, new neural connections form. If you stop using a skill, connections weaken. The brain is not a fixed structure. It is a dynamic, self-modifying system. And here is the thing. The location of mental functions can change. If part of the brain is damaged, other parts can sometimes take over the lost function. Language processing can shift from the left hemisphere to the right. In some cases, memory can relocate. The mind is not tied to specific locations in the brain. It is a pattern of activity that can move, reorganize, distribute itself differently. Where does your mind exist? It exists wherever the brain currently implements it, and that location can change. The mind is nomadic, moving through the brain as neural architecture reorganizes. Now let me connect this to something philosophical. The problem of personal identity, what makes you you, is it your memories, your personality, your body, your brain. Philosophers have debated this for centuries. The ancient ship of Theseus problem. If you replace every part of a ship over time, is it still the same ship applied to minds? If every neuron in your brain is replaced, are you still you? And neurons do get replaced, or at least their components do. The atoms in your brain are constantly being exchanged. Within a few years, the physical matter of your brain is different. Are you the same mind? If the mind is not the physical matter but the pattern, then as long as the pattern persists, you persist. But the pattern itself changes constantly. You are not the same person you were 10 years ago. Your memories are different. Your personality has evolved. Your knowledge has grown. What is the continuous thread that makes you the same person? There isn't one. Personal identity is a useful fiction. You are a process, not a thing. A pattern that persists through change but is never identical from one moment to the next. Where does your mind exist? Not in any fixed location or fixed form. It exists as a process unfolding through time, constantly changing, constantly reconstituting itself. Let me tell you why all this matters. Understanding that the mind doesn't exist in a simple location changes how we think about many things. Mental illness. If the mind is distributed across brain, body, and environment, then treating mental illness isn't just about fixing the brain, it is about changing the whole system. Therapy works partly by restructuring thoughts, but also by changing behavior, environment, social connections. The embodied extended mind framework explains why lifestyle changes, exercise, social support, environmental modifications, all of these help mental health because they're changing parts of the extended cognitive system education. If the mind extends into tools and environment, then education isn't just about putting information into brains. It is about teaching people to use external resources to structure their environment, to collaborate with others. The smart student isn't the one who memorizes everything. It is the one who knows how to find information, use tools, work with others. Extended cognition changes what we value in education, artificial intelligence. If mind is not tied to biological brains, if it is about patterns of information processing, then artificial systems can be minds too. The question isn't whether AI has consciousness. The question is whether it is part of an extended cognitive system that includes humans. And it already is. We use AI to augment our thinking, to extend our cognitive reach. The boundary between human mind and artificial mind is blurring. We're creating hybrid cognitive systems, human-AI partnerships, where mind is distributed across biological and artificial substrates. Let me tell you about one more thing. The future of mind, if minds can extend beyond brains, if they can incorporate tools, environments, other people, then future minds might be vastly more extended than current minds. Brain-computer interfaces could directly connect your neural activity to external computational systems. Your thoughts could flow seamlessly between biological brain and silicon circuits. Where would your mind be then? Partly biological, partly artificial, distributed across multiple substrates, or consider collective superintelligence. Minds connected through technology, thinking together, creating cognitive systems that transcend individual brains. Where is the mind of such a system? It is not in any individual. It is in the network, in the connections, in the collective pattern. The future of mind might not be about making individual brains more powerful. It might be about creating larger, more extended, more connected cognitive systems that distribute mind across many brains, many devices, many scales. Where does your mind exist in such a future? The question stops making sense. Mind becomes a property of the whole system, not localized to any part. Now let me bring this all together. Your mind doesn't exist in your brain because mind is not a thing in a place. It is a process distributed across multiple levels. It is in your brain, yes, but also in your body, in your environment, in your tools, in your social connections, in the culture you inhabit. Mind is relational, emergent, extended. It is what happens when brains interact with bodies, environments, and other minds. Where does your mind exist? Everywhere you cognitively engage with the world. Does this mean your mind is nowhere? Number. It means your mind is more distributed, more connected, more extended than we thought. The boundaries of mind are fuzzy, permeable, constantly shifting. This is not mysticism. This is what the science tells us. Neuroscience shows the brain is not isolated. Embodied cognition shows the body is part of the cognitive system. Extended mind theory shows the environment, and tools are part of cognition. Social psychology shows minds are embedded in social networks. All of this points in the same direction. Mind is not contained in the skull. it extends beyond. It is distributed, it is relational. It is process, not substance. And I think that is beautiful. It means you are not trapped inside your head. Your mind reaches out into the world. It connects with other minds. It extends through tools and culture. You are part of a larger cognitive ecosystem. Your mind is not isolated. It is interconnected with everything around you. That is what I've learned from studying consciousness, neuroscience, philosophy of mind. The mind is not in the brain. It is a distributed process that emerges from brain, body-world interactions. Where does your mind exist? It exists in the dynamic patterns of a complex system that includes but transcends your brain. It is counterintuitive. It challenges our everyday sense that the mind is inside the head. But it is what the evidence shows. Mind is not localized. It is distributed, extended, emergent. That is the nature of mind. And understanding this changes everything about how we think about ourselves, our relationships, our tools, our future. Your mind is not in your head. It is everywhere you reach. And that is the most important thing to understand about consciousness.